opportunity that we have. So the questions before us today are urgent ones. How do we transform our natural wealth into sovereign wealth? How do we ensure that what lies beneath our soil truly translates into jobs, into infrastructure, and prosperity above ground? And we're in Botswana. And much like Botswana has demonstrated, how do we shape that future through good leadership, sound policy, partnerships, and disciplined execution? These are some of the things that we have to think about as we rewrite or write the next chapter. So I'm going to invite our panelists, and we have a powerhouse panelist joining us today to unpack these questions. I'm going to invite Aisha Maina, who is the Managing Director of Aquarium Consult and Aquarium Oil and Gas. Aisha, come to there she go. Woo! And she's been teaching me some moves backstage. So, Aisha, welcome. And we have Dr. Mizi Fula Ngenge, who is Chairman of the African Diamond Council and the African International Diamond Exchange. Thank you. Wow, and we have Ron Chari, who is Executive Director of Chandler Institute of Justice. Ron, welcome to the stage. Thank you so much for joining us and bringing your wealth of experience, insight, and vision to this very timely conversation. So let's go straight to the chase, right? Across Africa, we often talk about the resource curse. Countries which are rich in minerals but poor in outcomes. So from your perspective, what are the most persistent systemic barriers preventing resource wealth from translating into broad-based economic prosperity for our people? And how do we break this cycle? I'll start with you.
So I would say that, first of all, when we talk about natural resources, usually we only talk about what is beneath the earth, right? So we talk about oil, we talk about minerals, we talk about water, but we don't talk about the human resource, which is our greatest resource. And the thing about it is, until we, one, recognize a human resource, not just on the continent, but in the globe, and understand that that is where competence lies in our people, I wouldn't say we're making the mistake of mismanagement. I would say we just don't know how to manage it, right? Because we're not recognizing our most important resource, which is people. So what happens is you have great people who, like Doctor, gets into an organization and tries to do a really good thing with one of the resources under the earth, but his 1 or 3 or 10 or 15 out of 500, that is not critical mass. So when we talk about systems, we need to talk about the systems that we need to remove from our mindsets first to understand that black is good, first and foremost, to understand the power that we have as a people to trust each other enough to come back, get into these organizations, and build sustainable systems.
Very well said. Dr. Ngenge, I'm going to turn to you with that same question.
For us, first, I'm from the Republic of Angola. We are somewhat dysfunctional in terms of how we operate. We speak in Portuguese language, so we often get overlooked. Today, I said during this entire morning session, I didn't hear the word Angola once. We are an African superpower. If you go back to 2024, we were leading SADC. We received Joe Biden in December last year. We were the host country for the US-Africa Summit. We're celebrating 50 years of independence. I mean, I can go on. We were Afrobasket champions, but I was very surprised that I didn't hear the Republic of Angola. And even our sister here from Namibia was born in Angola. And I don't think anyone in the room realizes that, but going back, we're not comfortable leading. We always need a model to follow. If you walk into a particular president's office of an African diamond producing country and you come with something very new, very innovative, the question will always come, show us a successful model where this is taking place. And even if it's exclusively designed to benefit the Republic of Angola, it probably won't get implemented because they want to see if it was successful in South Africa or Dubai or China or America. And we have to get over this habit of following. We have to develop a comfort level. We have to have some type of political or testicular courage where we can demonstrate that we have the capacity to lead rather than follow.
Thank you. And Ron, so you're doing a lot of work in the critical minerals space. So can you talk about some of your work and where you see the greatest opportunities for Africa in terms of, again, to our point about writing a new chapter about how we turn all of our wealth into prosperity?
Thank you so much. So I'm with the Chandler Institute of Justice. I think we invest in what is probably the most, what we think, overlooked lever to, I think, natural resources success, I think, on the continent. We invest in law reform. I think historically, the way some of our African countries were colonized, they were kind of natural resource transactions or land sales. Or I'm from Zimbabwe. I think what's called the right concession, which was a mining contract or land contract that actually led to the colonization of the country. But I think we operate in a sector where most of the laws are very much outdated and don't speak to the present needs of the continent. So we've been working with governments to formulate policies and create legislation that actually address some of the needs. And we look at mining probably from 3 different lenses. First of all, I guess mining and natural resources broadly. First of all, on the governance side of things, I think there's quite a lot of corruption. I think talking about mining, oil and gas, even land transactions, that's where probably most of the corruption takes place on the continent in terms of who gets awarded licenses to do what. Secondly, we also look at it as an economic opportunity that natural resources create. I think there's just talk about the resource curse, you know. So we're trying to see what kind of economic opportunities can we create from these natural resources. And then lastly, I think creating economic opportunities is not sufficient unless communities and the citizens actually benefit as well. Yeah. So we also notice that mining and oil and gas, most places takes place in the most remote and underdeveloped parts of the continent. So also trying to see how can we also utilize the power of law reform and contracts to see how can we get better deals when we negotiate with investors. And then also how can we also make sure that communities also benefit from. So I'm happy to talk more about the work we're doing, but I think our entry point is on the law reform and policies, because I think most of the laws that we're using, I think, don't actually speak to the present day needs of the continent.
Whoever wants to take this, just out of time, but I think this is very important, right? I think one of the challenges when it comes to this topic is, in many cases, the lack of a regional or continental framework, right, around how we manage and even negotiate our wealth, right? So as we look towards this new chapter, what would you all like to see, particularly from a policy standpoint, from African governments that will enable us to leverage and bring more value to our resources because of the power that we bring together on, united front, rather than each country negotiating on their own on the global stage? How do you see that, and what would you like to see moving forward?
So thankfully, there's the Africa Free Trade Agreement, right? Free Trade Area Agreement, which is I think is catching on. And I think what I would like to see is more countries sign up to it, right? And actually implement, because that, earlier on, I think the director or the MD of the Botswana Trade Center was talking about the increase in intra-Africa trade from 3% to 6%, right? But this is what AFTA does, right? So for me, if more countries sign up to AFTA and actually implement, And for years we've been screaming, Africa needs to not have visas for Africa. Because that is what will improve trade, that is what will improve collaboration. And when that happens and we can all come together and agree how our oil will be sold, how our minerals will be sold, when we can tap into each other's experience in processing our natural resources, and that includes human resources, right? Then we can actually come to a table, a negotiation table with something rather than asking for something.
Very well said. So in closing, I'd love for you all to share your thoughts with what the next 20 years could look like if we do things right. And what is one action that you think each of us here must commit to see that vision become a reality?
Well, prior to the event starting this morning, I sat with the royals, and Her Majesty put a very strong emphasis on trust. We do, in the diamond industry, African diamond producing countries have their own independent legislation. We don't really collaborate. What applies to Angola doesn't apply to Botswana, and that's due to a lack of trust. His Majesty the King focused primarily on storytelling. And there were some actors here, there were people in the entertainment industry who are participating in the event. I think it's very important for them to understand the level of influence they have to the mining sector, to the agriculture sector, oil and gas, and many other sectors, because those are the people who are responsible for storytelling. They are so key in terms of launching luxury brands. If you want to launch an African luxury brand, you can use African cinema to do that. If you go to Cannes Film Festival, there are 3 initiatives, Afro-Cannes, there's Pavilion Afrique and African Pavilion, and there's quite a few filmmakers coming from African countries. And it's nice to be able to sit down with them and communicate how they can help us achieve our objectives outside of the cinema sector. So I think that's very important going forward in the next 20 years.
Thank you. Ron, any final words from you?
Yes, I think what I've taken out from this conference is I think it's about the narrative, African narrative. And I think contextualizing to natural resources, we have an opportunity, I think, to reshape the narrative also for resources, you know. There's the whole buzz at the moment about critical minerals, which I think presently the dialogue is more shaped by maybe supply chain anxieties or geopolitical issues going on either between more advanced economies. But it hasn't been looked from an African perspective, but I think we constitute, I think, a significant portion of that global supply chain. Just here in Southern Africa, you have some of the minerals deemed to be critical, the energy transition minerals. But I think we're looking at criticality from advanced economies, supply chain anxieties that I mentioned. But also as from an African perspective, I think we need to also, it's very subjective to other people's understanding, but from our own subjective understanding, what is really critical to us? We're in Botswana right now. Diamonds don't really play a role in energy transition as much as lithium or copper. But the people of Botswana, I think they're quite critical. If you look at it from revenue generation, job creation, developing communities and infrastructure. So I think we now have an opportunity, I think, to kind of rethink before we get into some of these complex negotiations about how we're going to sell rice to mine and extract and export some of these commodities. So I think that's the opportunity that we have, that I think we really need to think back and maybe more forward-looking to say what minerals are critical to us and what are we using to determine the criticality of it, and then how can we shape our policies to make sure that we benefit from those minerals.
Wow, well, thank you all so much. There's so much to unpack here, and I wish we had more time. But thank you all. Can we give our panelists a big round of applause? Thank you so much. And thank you for sticking with us to the very end. We will see you tomorrow. Thank you.
fancy life akinayo. Like one need, shele takinayo. Can't confess, fancy life akinayo. Like one need, shele takinayo. Can't confess, fancy life akinayo. Like one need. Are you ashamed of me? Was I'm posting? Why? Or are you still searching? Was I'm paper for pictures? Wanna know? Was I in shape? Got my throne? Kapoko beside the throne. Public king, was I'm Galito? Tell me, are you even proud of me? One day I'm gonna shout. I'm gonna be a star. Everything you want, I'm gonna buy. Can you stick by my side? Cause I'm cause I got the clock up now. I'm promising now, but now Shele takinayo. Can't confess, fancy life akinayo. Like you want it, Shele takinayo. Can't confess, fancy life akinayo. Like you want it. Dali, I swear I'm a bad liar. So if I lie to you, it will backfire. I'm broke, but I'm tryna build an empire. So if you go now, get the understand. Cause Shele takinayo. Can't confess. Fancy life akinayo. Like you want it. Shele takinayo. Can't confess. Fancy life akinayo. Shele takinayo. Can't confess. Fancy life akinayo.